UK shares methodology to aid policy decision-making on energy and reduce emission causing climate change. According to British Ambassador Philip Malone, the one-day sitting aimed to help Lao officials better understand the use of the web-based 2050 calculator to assist energy use and emissions reduction decision-making. British Embassy in Vientiane partnered with the Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment to build awareness within the Lao government of a UK methodology to aid policy decision-making on energy and reduce emissions causing climate change.
Lao PDR is at a very interesting stage of its development. The economy is expanding very rapidly. A lot of work is being done here to develop the hydropower sector. So these questions of energy supply and energy demand are becoming even more important, I think. As the economy expands, obviously the demand for energy will increase. There are more cars on the roads, more land is being used productively. So I think it's a good time for Lao PDR to look at these issues so that it can consider the future of the supply of energy and indeed the route of the demand in order to decide on what would be the best way forward to manage those two factors in terms of the overall emissions. And I'm sure, like every country, Lao PDR wants to be able to develop its economy and its country in a very sustainable way, and this calculator helps to do that.
British Ambassador Philip Malone said Southeast Asia is important to the global efforts to combat climate change. He said he hopes governments in the region will take decisive action to move on to a lower carbon pathway. He said, adding that the climate calculator is an important tool to inform this kind of decision-making.
So the calculator, what it totally relies on is information, data that sort of gives you a clear sense of how much energy is used in different technologies at the moment, and also how much how much energy is generated in terms of technology, but how much energy is used also in the different ways that it's used, whether that's transport, within the home, within industry. So getting that data together is a big task, and that's something that was a big thing to achieve in the UK, and I imagine it will be a big thing to achieve here. The other thing that you need to be able to do is from that baseline of information is that you need to be able to work out how much could that change in the future. So in the UK we might have X amount of wind turbines at the moment, and we needed to work out by 2050 how many could we possibly have in the UK for this most ambitious level. Then also we needed to work out what was sort of reasonable intermediate levels of ambition from that top level to the bottom. And similarly here, if Laos has its own calculator, you'll need to have that baseline data, and you also need to have the information that says how much could energy generation change in the future and how much could demand change in the future. So that's really a big challenge, I think, for any country to overcome.
Developed by the UK's Department of Energy and Climate Change as part of the UK's effort to reduce her own emissions by at least 80% by 2050 relative to the 1990 levels, and 2050 calculator allows policymakers and others to see the emissions scenarios caused by policy decisions in key sectors like energy, transport, industry, and agriculture.
For the scale of change required, we need to act now.
The technologies and the policies that we have today, it's possible to both have economic expansion and economic growth, and at the same time to do it in a sustainable way, which is beneficial for any economy, and in a way that will reduce the amount of carbon emissions as much as possible. So I think in some ways it's perhaps the argument has some merit, but at the same time I think it's possible to do both. You can grow economically and at the same time do it in a sustainable and low carbon way. And using things like this calculator, using technology that's available, as we know there's all sorts of technologies for renewable energy and low carbon emissions for transport and things like that. So I think there are many options that any country can choose and have the benefits of growth and at the same time doing it in a sustainable way. everyone. Thank you for coming back.
The workshop was also attended by officials from the Ministry of Energy and Mines and other government stakeholders and international organizations active in the field of climate change. The workshop introduced the 2050 Energy Pathway Calculator, an interactive web-based computer model that enables users to experiment with the many different ways of reducing emissions.
There are many factors that are taking place which suggest that we are seeing changes in the climate, in sometimes very catastrophic events within our climate, which are having an impact on everybody's daily lives. So I think there certainly is a threat there, and while emergency may be a strong word at this point, but certainly if we don't take the kind of action that we need to take now, in the not too distant future, if we don't make any changes, it could well become a much more dire emergency situation. So the time to act really is now, to make the changes that are necessary, to use the technologies and policies that are available, and to make those changes so that in 40, 50 years' time we don't suffer any more consequences.
Ministry officials, specifically from the Department of Disaster Management and Climate Change, attended a workshop in Vientiane on Tuesday on the 2050 Energy and Emissions Calculator and Global Climate Change Project.